Hi, I'm Lita Leafin.
And I'm Jim Gordon.
And welcome to a special edition of Our City Tonight. We are here at Whistler.
Oh my God, the beauty of this place of BC and the Village. And we're only a few steps away from the Village and the recent Whistler Film Festival.
Yeah, we love the Whistler Film Festival. We've got some great interviews with some real awesome talent that we're going to share with you.
You know, I got to ask again, it seems to be becoming a tradition. You, in the last few years, every time we come up to the film festival, you wear that hat.
It's fantastic, don't you think? I've had many comments on it too.
Okay, watch this.
Well, we continue our look at the Whistler Film Festival for 2022. Joining us is a couple guys right now that are in a very funny movie about following your dreams, no matter how distant they may be in reality. They're going to stick with it till the end. The movie is called Boy City. You're looking at it right now. Joining us is the screenwriter, actor Matthew Karzis, and the actor also in the film, Gregory Calderon. Guys, welcome into this tight squeeze, but thank you for joining us. And congratulations on a good movie.
Yeah,
thank you for having us.
And congratulations, world premiere here at Whistler Film Fest. We're very excited to sit down with you and getting right into it. Okay. Tell us a little bit about the show, well, without giving anything away.
Well, it is the story of a group of men in their mid to late 30s who are still earnestly trying to make it as a boy band. So
we're just laughing because we really did enjoy it.
Right.
Why is that funny to you guys?
Yeah.
No, I'm saying something else. Sorry.
So essentially we follow these 5 lovable goofballs on their quest to attain what they feel like is a much deserved record contract and the subsequent fame and fortune that may come with that.
And
twists and turns.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that Lita and I really liked about the film, which isn't always the case with these kind of mockumentary or comedies, is that you guys, everybody in the cast is playing this for real. These characters, as funny as we find them, are quite sincere in their quest. Talk about that, Greg, and you coming to the role. Did you guys all sit down and constantly say, we have to swing for the fences, but we need to take this and play this for real and serious?
Totally. I think that's, we have all worked together a lot in the past, and that's kind of always been the way we approach it. Everyone is sort of like, takes the acting component of it all, seriously. And I think a lot of our favorite work is work that, treats the comedy with the utmost earnest nature, and I think that just like the stakes feel higher, and so much of the situations are so ridiculous that you don't have to play for laughs because it's already just heinously absurd what these guys are getting up to anyways.
And Matt, tell us what the audience should expect. I mean, we were talking earlier before we turned on.
Well, I think what audiences can expect is a really fun and ultimately surprising ride. I think the without giving too much away, I've been trying to couch this as best as I can because there's a large component of this film that does operate on a twist. And so what you will see though is really, I think the story of it ultimately is a love story. These guys love each other. They've been best friends their whole lives, and they do want to make it together. They do want the friendship to be the anchor for this career. And when they veer away from that principle, then that's when. Does that sound? It's funny. It's funny. It's a funny movie.
It's funny and cringy at the same time.
Yeah. But also it's very nostalgic for the period that we were sort of in our preteen adolescent phase in the late 90s and early 2000s when boy bands and pop singers ruled the roost, and it was Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, like every other band or singer was of that ilk, and so you can expect a lot of nostalgia for that period of time, which is something that whether it was in the 50s with Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, or through the 70s with Bay City Rollers, and David Cassidy, all those. So every era until right up till now, where we have K-pop and One Direction, and I feel like as long as there are teenage girls existing in our world, there will be boy bands that will be celebrated and venerated. And so even if you don't necessarily relate to our specific era that we're covering, you will have you will know some band or some concert or some show that dealt with this.
I think I think that's the connection too, as I said, is that everybody, the late 90s, I was too old of a guy in the late 90s to be a fan of those boy bands, but there is, it's still very precious to certain people, and these guys being a group of them. We should mention, came out recently on VOD December 27th. It had its premiere at the Film Festival in Whistler that we covered in December, but you can find this movie, Boy City, on VOD. Guys, congratulations. This is a very, very funny movie. I would say if you like The Office, things like that kind of cringing.
Larry
Sanders, The Office. You've got to see these guys in Boy City. Look for it on VOD. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Congratulations.
Pleasure to be here with you
Real
guys.
pleasure.
Boy City is life.
I'm aspiring to write at the level of my hero M.
Eminem?
Night Shyamalan.
Did he bring up M. Night Shyamalan? Yeah.
What a wonderful day up here in Whistler, and well, we're up here enjoying the Whistler Film Fest. We're working too.
Yes, we are. We are. We're taking a little break, and I tell you what, Lita, we're standing in front of the Blackcomb Lodge where we always stay when we're at the festival. The oldest hotel in this village. You see older pictures. It just looks amazing looking after us every time we're here. We're going to leave the village right now, though, and head back down to Vancouver.
He is a former career diplomat and Canadian ambassador who served at the Canadian Embassy in Moscow from 1971 to 74. His latest book is Ice War Diplomat, Hockey Meets Cold War Politics at the 1972 Summits. It is in part the basis for a wonderful documentary that is airing now called Icebreaker. I met him on the red carpet at the Whistler Film Festival in early December. He's back now to join us to talk about his new book. We'd like to welcome Gary J. Smith. Gary, welcome to the show.
Well, glad to be with you today.
Gary, what's, I thought I knew everything about that landmark series. I, of course, was a young lad when that series came out. I watched the film. I get stressed and angry. It doesn't take long. But what's great about your book is that I just assumed that this series in 1972 just happened. But your book talks a lot about the things that happened to build up to the 72 series, starting in 1968 when then brand new Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau wanted to improve the Canadian image. We weren't winning in international hockey. Walk us through the steps that lead up to 1971 and his visit to Russia.
Well, I think Pierre Trudeau had two things on his mind. One, there was a lot of pressure in Canada to try and restore our image in hockey. You know, we had last won the World Championships in 1961. The last time we won the Olympics was way back in 1952 with the Edmonton Mercuries. I should have mentioned the Trail Smoke Eaters in 61. So we kept losing to the Soviets year after year after year in the Olympics and the World Championships, and our pride was at stake. You know, we don't claim to be great in that many things around the world, but hockey sure was one. And so there was this great public feeling that we needed to do something to get our best players on the ice against the Soviets. And that became an election issue in 1968 with Pierre Trudeau. The other side of the equation, other than the hockey, was that Pierre Trudeau was worried about a war with the Soviet Union, and he wanted to try and ease relations with them. And he went on this visit in May 1971, 12-day visit, wanted to have some breathing space from the Americans, and he was looking for common ground. And what better common ground is there between Canada and the Soviet Union than hockey?
Gary, I have about a minute or so left. I want to jump ahead a year. There's so much that happens between what you just described and the series, celebrating 50 years this past fall. I want to talk to you about Game 8. The 4 games in Canada, train wreck as far as I'm concerned. You guys get to Moscow and there's all these rules and everything. Game 8 is us against them, all the marbles. You've got referee changes. It's chaos. Let's go home. Espo's at a hospital. Mahovlich saves Eagleson in the crowd. Give us a few seconds of you being in the middle of all the drama that went on in an already dramatic situation in Game 8.
Well, you're absolutely right. So the series is tied 3 games, each one tied. This is Game 8, the deciding game. And we've got 3,000 Canadian fans there making a huge noise, outshouting the Soviet fans. And Alan Eagleson and Harry Sinden, the general manager and the coach, say, we're not going to play Game 8 unless the German referees do not officiate the game. So we had hours and hours in negotiating this, and I put out the idea that we each choose one, and Harry Sinden decided he wanted the Swede, Uwe Dahlberg, and the Russians, who were KGB agents, said, no, he's sick. And Eagleson said, well, I just had breakfast next to him this morning. And they said, well, he's sick now. And it was a political illness, and they euchred us on that. But I think everybody realized that this game had to go on, and it did. There was one West German referee. We were able to pick the Czechoslovakian one, and the game went on despite a lot of controversy. And we had Eagleson on the ice. We had Parise threatening to hit the referee with his stick. The crowd was yelling at one point, let's go home, let's go home. But we made it to the final buzzer, and which was very important for the diplomatic side of things. But even more importantly, Paul Henderson scored with 34 seconds to go and won the series for Canada.
It is, I tell you, in my life, in my humble opinion, one of the greatest sports moments in my life. I will never forget that game, sitting in a gymnasium watching it as a young boy. And this is just, as I mentioned off the top, Gary, a great read. Lots of books have been written about the series, but you talk a lot about what led up to the series and behind the curtain, figuratively and literally, to get this series up and how you kept it on the rails. The book's called Ice War Diplomats. Here it is right here, folks. It's also the basis for a documentary film called Icebreaker, which airing on Super Channel, Rogers Sportnet. Look at your local providers for more information. Gary Smith, thank you for joining us on Our City Tonight.
Glad to be with you.
Cheers. Well, we hope you're enjoying this edition of Our City Tonight. Hey, don't forget you can check out print versions of our show, including our column in Iconic Concierge magazine. The new edition you're looking at right now is available, and you can check it out online. Check out Our City Tonight in Iconic Concierge magazine. It's available now.
This segment is sponsored by the Richmond Sentinel, providing news, entertainment, and human interest stories in print and online.
What you're looking at is one of the many great songs that a band called Doug and the Slugs put out in the late 70s, early 80s. That leads us to who is with us right now. Teresa Alfeld is the director of a long overdue, I think, a documentary on Doug and the Slugs called Doug and the Slugs and Me. Teresa, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
You're quite welcome. Congratulations on this film. As someone who was in his teen years when they were at the zenith of their career, it was really nice to see a film made about these guys because it reminded me how many hits and how influential this band was. But what's great about this documentary is it's got a lovely tie-in with you and growing up next door to Doug Bennett, who was Doug, of course, at Doug and the Slugs. How did this all come together, and how did you find yourself part of the story?
Well, I certainly didn't set out to make a film that I would be a character in. A few years ago, I did my first documentary, The Rank and File, with my producer, John Bolton. It's about a 1980s era politician, and we were looking for music that really captured Vancouver in the 80s, high energy fun. And naturally, I thought of Doug and the Slugs, a band that I'd been thinking about recently. And when we premiered the film, we just had such a positive response. People loved hearing the music. We got so much great feedback, not only about the film, but the use of Doug and the Slugs. Right. We realized, there's an easy film to make here. People still love these guys. No one's ever told their story. And luckily, we have a connection with the band. And technically, I do have a connection going back to the family. So we set out to just do a really fun film about Doug and the Slugs. But as we started going, it ended up taking some turns.
It's interesting, again, because they were so successful so quickly. And it's like when I've watched, say, a documentary on someone like Amy Winehouse, where all the cliches are there. And it's not to diminish anything they did, but it's the infighting. It's one guy getting more credit than the rest of the band. And it's just every cliche to the point whereby you get into the late 80s, they're not even talking anymore. But what you did in this movie that was so wonderful, one of the many things, is you got access to Doug's journals or diaries. So when you're talking to some of the people in this movie and going, here's what Doug said in 1980, I love that about this movie.
Thank you.
How did that, was there such trust between his widow and you
having grown up as neighbors?
Yeah, absolutely. So once we set out to make the film, I reconnected with Nancy Hare, who's Doug's widow, and she gave me access to the archive, and that was all the wonderful things you'd expect. That's the photos, the music video rushes, broadcast specials, all that great stuff. And then after a while, she handed me another box, and that was 39 personal diaries belonging to Doug that he'd started writing just as the band was getting off the ground in 1980, and he'd sort of concluded in 1989. So I know I'm pretty confident that Nancy wouldn't have given those to me had she not had a personal relationship with me dating back almost 30 years at that point. And it was an enormous responsibility. I'm the only person who's read all of those journals more than once, and I had to make, strong decisions about what Doug would have wanted out there, and what I don't think he would have wanted. So we made decisions, often in collaboration with the family, about what did we need to use to bring Doug's voice into the film.
And it's interesting too, because I was a young geeky teenage DJ playing these wonderful dance songs.
Awesome.
And my opinion of him back then, and I gotta admit, even up till seeing your film, was that he was a party guy. I loved it. But there was so much more depth which you brought about him, that he struggled with things. He was a sensitive soul.
Yeah.
And he was a very good writer of songs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people, when they think of Doug and the Slugs, they think of Too Bad and Making It Work and the really funny, goofy comic sort of persona that the band developed. But the more I read Doug's words, and also the more I read Doug's lyrics, like really read some of the lyrics, especially on the early records, I realized there's so much more to this man than his public persona and even the bands. There's so much more depth, so much more darkness, so much more struggle. It was something that I, as another person working in the arts, it really resonated with me too. And so the hope with the film was not only to showcase Doug and Doug and the Slugs as much more sophisticated and deep and meaty than just the Too Bad band, but also bringing Doug as a character who I never think we really understood when he was alive.
I don't want to give away too much, but one of the personal threads that goes through the movie is you and Doug's daughter, and that you're joined at the hip all through public school and everything, and then you go, which happens, you go your separate ways. Yeah. I don't want to give away much on this, but I was glad to see how that played later in the film, because it was very touching and very real, and it really helped to have their father's words that they could look at.
Yeah.
Congratulations on this wonderful film. If you were a certain age, or if you're not, you don't know the music of this wonderful band, go check out Doug and the Slugs and Me. It aired this month, I want to get this right, on CBC starting January 15th, but you can also find it on CBC Gem.
Yes, that's correct.
Check out Doug and the Slugs and Me, and a really talented filmmaker, Teresa Alfeld. I'll expect you back when you do your next film.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, James.
You bet. Cheers.
This segment was sponsored by the Richmond Sentinel, providing news, entertainment, and human interest stories in print and online.
Well, if you've watched our show over the last few years, you've seen this gentleman. He is a writer, editor. He has written for a variety of mediums and is the founder of the very popular website, travelingboy.com. We're so happy to welcome back Ed Boitano to our city tonight.
Oh, thank you, Lita and Jim. It's a really great pleasure to be here.
Great to have you back, sir. I'm liking that Sinatra-esque outfit you're wearing today. Very hip.
Yes, Frank and I are very close.
Can anybody really be close to Frank? Ed, we've had you on a couple times before to talk about a variety of things. One of the things that Lita and I love is that your website evolved, was kind of forced to add things due to the lack of travel for almost 2 years. I think, and Lita does too, it's made your site better. Let's talk about what you've done in terms of the non-travel part of your website.
Right. Well, thank you. That's a very good question. That's something we worked on, as you said, because of the lack of travel, we're not really receiving that many travel articles. And so what we've been doing is, we're bringing in other things that are kind of related to travel, whether it be like, we'll have our readers rate their, favorite road movies, so that pertains to travel, favorite road songs. And then we'll do things that are kind of fun, because we recently had one called Places in the Heart. And this is where our readers would select a certain destination where their life was greatly impacted. And that's been wonderful. And it's very good for our readers as well, because they can see a different side of their writers.
And you've been getting your readers involved with input with your readers poll. Tell us a little bit about that. That's really interesting part of your website.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lita. That's a very good question. Yeah, once we do our writers poll, then we'll open it up to readers so they can add their own comments and their own selections. So that kind of involves them as well. So that's good too. Always trying to, we send out and they send in. It's good.
Ed, one of the things that you, probably one of the highlights I would imagine for you and your lovely wife Deb in 2022 was actually taking a great river cruise, something I've never done. I'd like to try one time, but talk about the great trip you took back in October.
Yes, it was a huge trip. It was an AMA Waterways cruise, and it was on a vessel called the Amalira. And it left from Paris and it goes to Normandy. And there's, many stops, many ports to call on the journey. And then eventually you head back to Paris. And the ports of call were just stunning. I know that when North Americans hear the word Normandy, they immediately think of the Operation Overlord beachheads. And yes, we did spend a day seeing that. It was very moving. Saw the Normandy American Cemetery and Memorial. But also there was, things like Rouen, which is the capital city of provincial Normandy. And then there's also, say, Givenchy, where Claude Monet, the Impressionist painter, lived for, I think 43 years or so, and built these stunning gardens, which he would soon paint, and it became a rural artist community. So that was quite fascinating. And, in Rouen, we'd also see this is the place where Joan of Arc met her death. And so we'd attend that site. And then we'd see the Rouen Cathedral, what Monet had painted 43 times to show the different aspects of light during the day. So yeah, it was really, really absolutely extraordinary, being part of that.
Always a great pleasure having you on the show, sir. I want to just point out one quickly thing for people to check out. Best Director Trilogies, which I was very proud that you asked me to contribute to when it comes to movies. Check that out and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's Ed Boitano, travelingboy.com. Check out this fantastic website, not just travel, as we mentioned. Ed, always a pleasure. Give our best to your lovely wife, Deb, and hope to see you soon.
Great. Thank you, Lita. Thank you, Jen. I can't thank you enough. It's such a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you, pal. Right back at you.
Thanks, Ed. Well, the last 3 or 4 years we've been coming up to the Whistler Film Fest. We've stayed here and it's been so amazing. Convenient, great rooms. What I'm talking about is the Blackcomb Lodge right behind us.
Yeah, Whistler's oldest. You see pictures from the early 80s. It's quite amazing to see this building right here. Nothing else around it either. We're going to go inside right now and meet the people who look after us every time we stay at Blackcomb Lodge. Well, for the last 5 years, 2020 being the exception, our home base at the Whistler Film Festival here in the Village has been Blackcomb Lodge. 42 years young this year, guys. Rita Benny joining us again to talk about this great location. Rita, you had a great line earlier. You said this place has been here so long that all roads and walkways shoot off from this place because it's been here that long.
Yeah, it was the first building, and in the design of the village, everything shoots off of this building.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, and that's why people's Google Maps and stuff don't work.
Yeah,
because
that's right.
Everything is comes right off. Yeah.
We were here last year, and time flies. The concern was we're not sure what's going to happen at Christmas, the holiday season. A year later, what I found interesting, and Benny, I'll start with you, is that you guys were saying that it still was a challenging 2022. With staffing in the summer. Benny, you pick it up from there.
I was doing housekeeping myself.
You were doing house, and I should say, Rita also mentioned you guys stayed open when a lot of places closed or closed most of their hotel down.
They told us to close down, and I convinced Rita. So it was a lady, her name Delilah, and I working doing housekeeping. So I never done it before, but somehow I survived. And we were cleaning between 15, 17 units a day.
Rita, let's talk about last year. Renovations were in place, still going on bit by bit with the rooms, like even things down to like countertops. But also, you got a restaurant that's going to make this really kind of a one-stop shop sort of vacation getaway.
Yes, one of the things is that the building's kind of going back to its original design. So it's when you walk out the door here, you've got the hotel. Then as you walk all the way along the building, it's all restaurant now. So soon to open. It's been under construction for over a year. So it's a very exciting project, I think, for the village itself. I think it will give it a really nice ambiance as you're walking down Skiers Approach, because our building takes all of Skiers Approach.
It is. I said to you guys earlier, it's misleading. We've stayed here a number of times, but I always forget how long this building goes from where we are right now. We also should mention some great news. You guys have moved up TripAdvisor. Let's list you guys one of the top 10 hotels in Whistler.
Yeah, we made it to the top 10. I think we've been at 7 for a while, and we got the TripAdvisor's Traveler's Choice Award, and that was very exciting because with all the hard work that we put in here with very little staff, to be able to achieve that, was quite gratifying.
I think so, and as I said to you last year and even before COVID, you guys are really hands-on and really, you see yourselves, I see you guys everywhere looking after everything.
And this building, like as you said, 42 years old, right? We never had that travel award. First time when we took over, Rita and I.
Yeah.
So I worked really hard and we got it, right?
It was the first time ever.
The first time ever this building.
42 years, yeah.
Yeah, so, don't underestimate us, maybe we're not hoteliers, but we do a better job.
And you guys know, you can't get complacent, whether you have a restaurant or a business or a hotel, you have to keep upgrading. I think one of the great things that people tell me when they see our show and then they stay here is that it's a great getaway for groups, 3 or 4, because the rooms can hold that, where everyone can have their own bed because the rooms are built that way.
Yeah, we're one of the only properties that have 4 separate beds in a room.
For Whistler.
Whistler, yeah?
Yeah.
The rooms are made for the family, so if you do have a family or you want a nice weekend getaway, I highly recommend Blackcomb Lodge. Rita, Benny, they'll look after you while you're here. Guys, thank you again for hosting us here in Whistler.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Closed captioning and other promotional considerations provided by Hamilton High Street Senior Residence, Richmond's newest senior living community.
Well, we've had a great time here in the Whistler Village, and again this year, Lita, for I think the 8th year at the Whistler Film Festival.
But it's time to say farewell from beautiful Whistler Village, and thanks for watching.
Yeah, we'll see you on the next edition of Our City Tonight.
Don't forget to check out past episodes and individual interviews, all on the Our City Tonight YouTube channel. While in Whistler, Our City Tonight stayed at the Blackcomb Lodge, serving guests in the heart of the village since 1980. The Richmond Sentinel, providing news, entertainment, and human interest stories in print and online.